Hi, this is Ashley with SurrogateFirst, your three-time surrogate and intake director. We are blessed to be able to have Jason here with IFI, or International Fertility Insurance, which we use a lot, and he protects our clients, our surrogates, and our intended parents. I am so excited to have you here and be able to talk about this, because I think this is a topic where we should not be skimming on protection, and it can come back to backfire. So I'd love for you to be able to share a little bit about yourself, and I'll share your screen. Let me know when you want me to change the page.
Okay, perfect. A little bit about myself and my company. I've been doing insurance since 2008. I've been doing surrogacy specific insurance since about 2014. And then as things progressed, launched this company, International Fertility Insurance, with the purpose of providing insurance for surrogacy and egg donation. And we now work with close to about 200 different surrogate agencies, attorneys, and clinics around the globe. And myself and my team have somewhere between about 5 to 8 consultations with intended parents all over the world each day. And we work with over 100 different insurance companies. So we're not focused on any one company. We're just always looking to provide you the best options from both the price and coverage standpoint. So that's who we are.
Awesome. We appreciate you guys.
This is just a necessity in today's world, is to put this little page here. But just in short, what this means, my view on this is not meant to be a big legal document, but rather that you should ask questions. So whether you're a surrogate, whether you're an intended parent, just be sure that you ask all the questions, because the contracts that you'll have are between yourself and the insurance company, not IFI, my company. We're just here to help get you to a good informed decision. So we always joke around about having unlimited questions. So no limit to the questions, no limit to the consultations, until you feel perfectly capable, ready to move forward on your decisions. So, all right.
I definitely appreciate that. I know we ask you a bunch of questions and you guys are pretty quick to respond. Even as you guys have grown, you always are quick to respond and be able to help our parents and our surrogates.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's kind of the cornerstone of what we do. When I started the company several years back, my kind of chief goals were being super responsive and being super educational. So we have videos on everything we do, and we make it a goal of ours to respond to emails all the same day, which seems like such an obvious thing, but it's not everybody does that these days. So so what we're going to do today is just talk on a very high level, very basic level, about all the different risks and the insurance to help cover egg donation and surrogacy. We're going to talk about the timeline and how you interact with us and how you can learn more. What we won't get into today, but we're always happy to connect with you one-on-one, would be the pricing of this and that, and the fine details of each policy. It would take much longer to do that, and this is meant to be just a brief overview. But again, we're more than happy to spend time with you to help you get ready for what you have ahead. I'll also add that we have videos on everything we offer. So while we won't talk about the pricing or the details today, we have videos on each topic. So you could just request, hey, I'd really like to see a video about maternity insurance, and we can give you that, or life insurance, we can give you that, so forth. So down at the bottom there, or the middle to bottom, we're going to talk about our health insurance reviews, which is kind of the first step in things. Our maternity insurance, which is the insurance to cover surrogate during a surrogate pregnancy. We'll talk about complications insurance during the IVF process for both the egg donor and the surrogate, life insurance, disability insurance, and then for folks from outside of the US that are planning to have a baby in the United States, we have newborn insurance that can help cover the baby or babies when they arrive. So
perfect.
So this is a very busy, lot of information on one page slide, but I'll just briefly kind of go left to right and say that this is our sort of timeline slide. When we start over to the left, you've got the pre-match or the match, where you're just connecting between intended parents and surrogate. you probably or might need an egg donor. And in that case, we have the IVF complications insurance for the donor. You probably will need to review the surrogate's insurance to see does her existing insurance policy, presuming that she has one, does it cover a surrogate pregnancy? And if you're not from the United States, that might be very confusing to you. Well, why doesn't all insurance cover everything, particularly if in your country, your insurance, if you have national health insurance that covers everything, it might seem like, well, why doesn't it cover, in this case? But the United States is a different market, and we have different ways, and some plans will cover a surrogate pregnancy, some will not. So we have a service to help evaluate the surrogate's insurance. We have disability insurance, maternity insurance, and newborn insurance. So all of these topics can be theoretically discussed early on while we're preparing to get matched. And then we get into having an IVF, a cycle, a transfer, retrieval, so forth. And this is where we'll typically start looking at life insurance, getting insurance to cover both the donor and the surrogate for complications. We offer service to support local monitoring, which is where you might have a surrogate from one area or a donor from one area that is going to have an IVF procedure in another area, and then needs local monitoring of her after the procedure to make sure she's okay and report the findings back to the doctor that did the procedure. So we have all of this, and then travel insurance for the donor or the surrogate. All that sort of happens in that middle stage. And then we have the pregnancy and the delivery actually happening. And this is where we would have things like well baby care for the newborn, medical billing management throughout the pregnancy, and then insurance for the babies when they arrive. So generally,
I'm sorry.
Ashley. Yeah.
You even help domestic parents then with life and disability insurance options too.
Absolutely, yeah. So if as you're expanding your family, we certainly we work with about 80 different life insurance companies and a handful of disability companies. So perhaps up until this point, you have insurance to cover yourself through work, but it might be, say, $100,000 of coverage or something like that. And maybe that was fine until now, but now you're adding a child or children, and everything's getting much more serious. And it's a good idea to evaluate your life insurance and have something that isn't specifically tied to your work, because you could change jobs or so forth. And disability would be the same idea, but just in case you didn't die, but rather got hurt and needed, income to continue on to help take care of your family. Yeah. And so down at the bottom, I also note that generally Ashley and her team will make an introduction to us, usually around the time that you match, but sometimes earlier, if there's even before you've got something matched, and if you have questions, we're here to help. We want you to feel great as you move forward with SurrogateFirst on your journey.
Awesome.
So the first thing we're going to talk about is maternity insurance. We're gonna do a real high level on everything we do, but basically this page here is going to just kind of walk through, sort of start to finish, the discussion of covering the pregnancy and the delivery for the surrogate. So the first thing that we have to decide is, does her insurance, assuming she has insurance, some surrogates do, some surrogates don't, but assuming that she has insurance, does it cover a surrogate pregnancy? So we have a service that, and I'll actually show an example of this on the next page after we get through this one, but we have a service to evaluate the insurance to see whether it has a couple things really we're looking for. Does it have exclusions for surrogacy, and does it have liens? So exclusions are pretty simple. It means it's not going to cover a surrogate pregnancy. And then the lien is a more complicated term, but basically what this means is that in some cases, you'll have a plan that the surrogate's compensation is requested by the insurance company in exchange for them covering the pregnancy. So for example, if the surrogate is making X amount of dollars, then that would be added as an extra cost, or sometimes it's all of it, sometimes it's part of it, but added as an extra cost on top of the monthly cost of the plan and the expenses that the intended parents would have of the plan. So we're looking to see whether or not her insurance has any of that language. And these are usually about 125-page booklets. And our company, we do about 1,000 reviews like this per year. So it's definitely something we don't take lightly, and we have a whole team of people that's what we do. So we evaluate that. Based on the outcome, one of two things happens. Either we find that it will cover the pregnancy or that it won't cover the pregnancy. When it won't cover the pregnancy, we've got a couple different things that we can do. Number one, if the timing's right, there's what's called the ACA, which is short for Affordable Care Act. Sometimes you might hear this called Obamacare, because President Obama was the one that put this in action several years ago. But basically, this is just your typical United States sponsored health insurance, basically. And it is only available, we can search for policies typically in November and December, and then they usually have a January start date. So depending on if you're watching this live or if you watch a recording, your timing could be different, but generally, if you're late in the year, SurrogateFirst will try to see if this is a fit for you. If it's more like the beginning of the year or the middle of the year, this won't be an option, and you'll need to do a different route unless you want to wait until January, and most people don't want to wait. So we have our search and placement service. We also can monitor the payments to make sure that they're paid, because if you started on the plan in January and then missed a payment in May, all of a sudden you'd have no insurance and you'd have to wait until the following January. So that could leave pregnancy uncovered. So we have payment monitoring service and support for questions. And then we do medical billing management as well. These are all optional sort of add-ons to the plans. But medical billing management, the United States healthcare system is very, very complicated. And we have a team of, I believe, 9 now medical billing specialists that can help support to make it a lot easier for you in the whole process. When there's no ACA, which could be a couple different things, either it's outside of the open enrollment window, which is that November, December timeframe, or if there's no plan available. So when we search for the plans in November, December, just because there's plans that exist, there's not necessarily plans that don't have exclusions and also will cover the doctor and the hospital that you'd like to use. So if one of these things happens and there's not a plan that fits, then we have what we call the IFI, short for our company name, International Fertility Insurance, IFI Surrogacy Maternity Plan, which is backed by Lloyd's of London. Lloyd's of London is the biggest, oldest specialty insurance provider in the world. They've been around over 300 years, and they are the backbone behind our plan. So what this is a cost containment plan where we're actually negotiating rates with the doctor and hospital of your choice, hopefully getting some discounted rates actually, and then we're arranging that we're going to hold escrow and manage the pregnancy using that allotment of funds. But at the same time, we've set up insurance behind it in case there's a $200,000 or $300,000 bill. We also have the ability to start on this plan and then move to the ACA plan that I just mentioned. In our industry, that's called bridge the gap is the term that people use, because you're bridging the time frame from now, for example, until January. So we're providing a bridge on the other plan and then moving to the ACA plan if there's one that fits. Okay, so now let's assume for a moment that the surrogate's insurance plan actually did cover a surrogate pregnancy. We'll also offer what's called a secondary or backup or contingency plan, and that's down at the bottom of the page. And that's where we are providing a plan just in case her existing insurance doesn't work. And why would it not work? Well, number one, someone could have been wrong about it in the first place. Very rare that would be the case, but in theory, that could be the one reason. But it's more so that maybe in the middle of the pregnancy she moves, and you might have a contract that says she's not allowed to move, but just life happens, and sometimes someone might need to move. Someone could get married, someone could get divorced, and this could change their plan. Someone could change jobs. They could be working for, just to use a couple names that everyone probably knows, they could be working for Apple, and maybe the Apple plan covers, and then maybe they move, or their spouse, or maybe they're on their spouse's plan, and the spouse moves from Apple to Google, for example, and maybe the Google plan doesn't cover surrogacy. So if you change companies, or if the company were to go out of business or something like that. So these are all the reasons that you might consider what's called a secondary plan. If we go to the next page, it'll show an example of what the health insurance review looks like. You're obviously not supposed to be able to read this. It's just very small print, but basically what we're doing here is we're really digging into the plan, the 125-page booklet or so that we reviewed, and we're going to provide an opinion on why we think it should or shouldn't cover, and some of the details of the plan and some of the language that will show why we thought it would cover or why we didn't think it would cover. Is there a lien, so forth. So we explain all the risks, real easy to read format. That's our health insurance review there. All right, let's keep going. So now we've figured out her insurance. Now we're going to work towards having an IVF transfer, or maybe an egg donor retrieval to start. And this is called IVF complications insurance. So if we keep going, we're going to first talk about donor. So if you don't have embryos yet, we have insurance to cover the egg donor. And this is very simply called egg donor complications insurance. And you'll see kind of in the middle there some of the reasons why, or some of the potential claims. So ovarian hyperstimulation is a very common thing. Ovarian torsion, allergic reaction to medication, bleeding, cramping, nausea. These are just some of the things that could go wrong. And generally speaking, an egg donor's personal insurance won't cover her act of being an egg donor, because she's doing something that to the insurance company is a choice. It's not a medical necessity. So her insurance generally won't cover it. So this is why there's insurance for that. Very rare that there would be a need, but there's also an option to add accidental paralysis. And a little bit more commonly, there is the option to cover loss of reproductive organs. So if something were to horribly go wrong and she were to need a partial or full hysterectomy, or lose an ovary, lose a fallopian tube, there's insurance that can cover those things too.
Now, do the clinics normally put this in place if you have your egg donor with the clinics? Have you seen that, or is this something parents should be looking into and making sure that it's in place?
So I would say it's really important to make sure that it's in place. I would say, generally speaking, a surrogate agency will contract with a clinic, or sometimes you'll see intended parents start out with a clinic and then move on to an agency. And so bottom line, you definitely want to make sure that there's some insurance for this. Sometimes the clinics provide it, sometimes they don't. I would say it's like 50-50.
Oh gosh, okay.
And if the clinic provides it, you'll see a cost associated for it. If not, you'll usually see a cost associated at the agency level. So I'd say it's all over the place. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not, but it's very important that it exists.
Yeah.
And then on the surrogate side, which is also known as egg recipient, and I don't actually love that term. I think it should be embryo recipient, but nonetheless, that's the name of the policy. It's been like that for 10 years or so. And but I call it surrogate IVF complications insurance because I think that's a bit more clear. So this is the same policy, but instead of covering the egg donor, now we're covering the surrogate. And you see some potential claims there from allergic reaction to medication, ectopic pregnancy, or ectopic rupture, abdominal pain, cramping and bleeding. If any of these were to happen, again, the surrogate's insurance will commonly not, will usually have an exclusion for that because it's her acting on behalf of others. And so I think there's sometimes is a misconception that this isn't needed. Sometimes a surrogate's insurance may actually work by accident. If the hospital doesn't realize she's acting as a surrogate and she comes in bleeding, they may just take care of it. But this is insurance in both cases, the donor and the surrogate. This is insurance if they go to the emergency room. That bill will usually be a couple $1,000s usually. If she's hospitalized, in either case, it could be anywhere tens of thousands of dollars, or very rarely hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on how bad it is. So these are both really inexpensive coverages that cover for one cycle. And then you can, of course, buy it again if you needed more cycles. So, and you see the optional coverages down at the bottom that we just talked about as well. On the surrogate side, these coverages could also be covered through what we call the surrogate accidental death policy that we'll talk about in a few minutes. If you buy it for this policy, it would only be for 4 months. If you buy it on the other policy, it'd be for 18 months. So most people for the surrogate would buy those optional coverages on the accidental death policy. Let's keep moving. All right, moving on to life insurance. So for the surrogate, we have 2 different ways that we can cover. Most commonly, people use this policy that I mentioned at the top, which is called a surrogate accidental death policy. This is a life insurance policy that was specifically built years ago for surrogacy to make it super easy. It can be ordered online by either the agency. Pretty commonly, that's what would happen. Or in independent matches, it would be ordered by the intended parents. And you can get coverage all the way up to $750,000 with no underwriting. So it's just super easy. It's ordered in a matter of a minute or two and instantly approved. And then there's some optional coverages. Number 1, to add coverage for the intended parent. So this is not coverage that if the intended parent dies, but rather coverage that if the surrogate dies, that the intended parent can get their money back. It would still be obviously a terrible situation, but at least financially, you could sort of go back to the start and try again if you want. We can provide coverage for a variety of amounts. We see $100,000 commonly, but we can do $150,000, $175,000, whatever you need to cover the amount of money that you have spent or will be spending on surrogacy and egg donation, the non-recoverable costs. That's what that's there for. The loss of reproductive organs, as I mentioned on the last couple slides, this is now for a longer period of time meant to cover from the start of medication all the way through the delivery and beyond for complications related to the delivery. And this would be if you have a loss of a single ovary, loss of a fallopian tube, a partial hysterectomy, or a full hysterectomy. This would then pay the surrogate. And usually you'll see in the contracts that there's a specific amount aligned with that. And this policy, there's 3 different options we offer to try to connect with what the intended parent's responsibility is. So instead of covering yourself, you can pay a much smaller amount and have the policy do it. Permanent disability is that if the surrogate did not pass away, but rather had a permanent injury, there's coverage for that. And then just recently, our company was pleased to announce exclusively through us that you can get COVID coverage on this policy as well. And so that's obviously a big concern in the world, hopefully going away sometime. But for the moment, if you'd like to add coverage that for the surrogate, if she were to pass away via COVID, that there's an option for that too. And then we also offer term life insurance. Perhaps you're familiar with that. This is more complicated to get, but we certainly do it. And we offer it through about 80 different insurance companies. It's a much more required process with an application and underwriting, an exam usually, and so forth. But it is possible if it's in your contract that that's what is requested, we do that as well. Moving on. Now let's talk about the surrogate disability. So what this means is that typically in a contract, you'll have a need to cover lost wages, childcare, and housekeeping if the surrogate were to be put either in the hospital or on bed rest with complications. So moving on, if we go, we've got 2 different scenarios, either a surrogate that works or even a stay-at-home mom. There'll still be potentially a request for childcare and housekeeping if she's on bed rest. Fortunately, we have 2 different ways we can help with this. The first one is on the next page, and it's called hospital indemnity. And what this is basically for short-term needs, we can have a daily benefit paid to the surrogate, which could then be used to cover lost wages, childcare, and housekeeping. We can choose between a $300, $600, or $900 benefit. And you would just basically align that with how much does the surrogate make, or what the needs are for lost wages, childcare, and housekeeping. We won't go into great detail on this call or this webinar today, but we can certainly dig deeper when the time comes. For longer term issues, we have the surrogate Bedrest policy, which is meant to cover up to 20, or actually all the way up to 32 weeks we have options for. So we can either cover 12, 16, 20, or 32 weeks. And we do singletons or twins. We can go up to $1,800 per week or even more in request. And this is a policy that will cover 80% of her net, or her take-home lost wages, 100% of childcare, 100% of housekeeping, if she's on bed rest due to complications. And this will have a deductible of either 7 or 14 days, which means that the intended parents would cover that period of time before the policy starts. But that previous policy, the hospital indemnity policy, can often help with covering that early need. So, and that is our disability options. And then finally, we're going to talk about newborn insurance. So I know a lot of people watching today are from other countries. If you look into it, you'll find that your insurance likely doesn't cover you having a baby in the United States, Canada, or any other markets. Usually your coverage is limited to your own country, or maybe like emergency needs in another country. But covering a baby being born via surrogacy is typically not something that your insurance would cover, nor is it covered typically under your agency fees. So we offer coverage that can cover both. We have a variety of plans, but some will cover the needs for well baby care, which is typically the first couple nights in the hospital after a healthy baby or babies have arrived. And this is typically something in the range, and I'm recording this in July of 2022, but typically between $3,000 to $6,000 is what we'll see for that. The costs seem to go up every year. And then we also will help cover the intensive care unit, or the NICU, and which stands for neonatal intensive care unit or newborn intensive care unit. So sometimes you'll hear the term NICU. And this typically, again, in July of 2022, will be about $10,000 US dollars per day, sometimes even more. So this is a need that if the baby or babies were to arrive, say a month or 2 months early, you'd be talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, even upwards. I've seen bills in $1 million even for the NICU for twins, for example. So what's included? We offer we offer a variety of plans that will cover these types of needs. And then we also offer a service that we call our newborn negotiation and billing management service. And this is where we can actually negotiate with the hospitals to reduce the costs of either the well baby care or the NICU. And this could be either on its own or more commonly paired with one of the insurance plans that we offer. If we go to the next slide, this is ever changing. So if you're looking at a recording of this, you'd certainly want to check in with us and make sure that these all still apply. But if you're watching this live, these are the versions, these are the options that exist today in July of 2022. So first we offer a plan called Bupa Global, which is for Europeans and those from the UK. If you consider the UK to not be part of Europe, but UK and Europe, but not Switzerland, Germany, and Ireland, unless you've got connection to an address in one of those countries. This plan is probably the best in terms of coverage and cost, but you do need to get it at least a good 4 months ahead of the transfer, because you have to have it 10 months before the baby or babies arrive to avoid underwriting. So we in talking about this one, we want to have conversations very early on. It's a great plan with up to $5 million or so of coverage. If this doesn't fit for you, we offer two other options. One's called Great Morning, and Great Morning has some great plans as well, up to $1.5 million of coverage. But the only challenge, or one of the challenges with this plan, is that you have to get it once you've had your fetal anatomy scan, which is generally about 18 weeks or so into the pregnancy. So you run a small risk that there's been complications before that and that they might decline your application. So it's small, but there is a risk in waiting for Great Morning. in that something goes wrong before you have a chance to apply for it. And then Lloyd's of London, you can apply as early as the confirmation of pregnancy. It is quite a bit more expensive than the other two plans, but Lloyd's of London, again, has been around 300 years, so it's a super strong company, and they have expensive plans, but they're good and they're reliable. Coverage up to 500,000 in singleton only for Lloyd's. And then down at the bottom, you see our newborn negotiation service that I mentioned previously on the last page, but basically, again, you could either buy this on its own or more commonly with Great Morning or Lloyd's. Bupa, you won't need it actually, because Bupa's plan will actually include well baby care, at least on the elite plan, and even on what they call the premier plan, you can pay to add your baby, and then you've got well baby care as well. And then travel insurance, Bupa will include travel health for one of the intended parents, but the other one would want travel insurance. And for Great Morning or Lloyd's, again, you probably would want travel insurance for yourself if you're traveling here to cover your own medical needs. And that reaches the end of our presentation, but you've got some information on the screen how to get a hold of us. We are super, super available and here to help you. It's a lot of information, but we want to make it a good, comfortable decision for you. And between us and SurrogateFirst, you'll be in good shape.
Awesome. I appreciate you, giving that. I didn't even know about Bupa. I'm not in the intake department, but that's great to hear that you guys are having more options. I know you guys are always working super hard to find new products to protect, parents and surrogates. I do have a question. So, we always talk about parents and getting these items in place, but do you think it's important for surrogates to understand and know what's out there that they could, potentially be able to use? So for myself, I'm a 3-time surrogate going into my 4th journey. And I plan to purchase the permanent disability, right, for myself, or upgrade different items, right? So is that something surrogates can do? Like, hey, if you're going to pick up the life insurance policy and that, permanent disability wasn't in the contract, or they didn't feel that that was something, for the parents to purchase, can they purchase those items, or does it have to be a separate policy? How does that work for surrogates to be able to make sure that they're being protected too?
Yeah, sure. So I would say a couple things. First of all, our information was in the last page of the slide deck, but you can write us at info@internationalfertility.com, and our team can help. So if a surrogate has a question, hey, here's what I'm being offered. Does this seem like I'm getting what I should? We'll certainly field questions. And then I would say they're rare, but we have seen cases where the contract maybe, for example, covers permanent disability is just something that's very underappreciated, I think, to use what you're suggesting here. And so you might not see it in the contract, but maybe you think it's important and you're willing to pay for it yourself even. And so sometimes we'll see where that will happen, and it'll just be a matter of, we could either split off an invoice, say it's a couple $100s, for example, we can split off an invoice and send that directly to you to pay. Or more likely, I think what would happen is you would just agree for, make an arrangement that the intended parents would cover it, but then maybe $200, for example, would come out of your, next round of compensation or something like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, because I think about those kind of things, because the chances of it happening are slim to none, right? But I do bring an income into my family. And so if I was to be disabled, and I know the risks of being pregnant, and I think it's important for surrogates also to educate themselves and know, I think for me, the hospital indemnity plan, I learned about it. So I shared it with my intended parents, and they're like, well, that makes sense. A few $100 to be able to protect us if there was something to go wrong, or even, your different plans that you guys have. So I definitely think it's important, especially as I see more and more surrogates going independent. Parents may not know this information. And so if we're going into this, we need to be educated as much as possible so that we can protect us and the intended parents. Because, our whole point is to help them grow their families. They still got formula and college and everything like that afterwards. And so I always want to make sure that parents are kind of protected in that, but also surrogates. Your term life insurance, what if I was a surrogate and it got put in place for me because term is very affordable, and I decided I wanted to keep it after. What does that
Yeah,
look like for surrogates?
so that's a great question. And for many years, before I started this company, I was an insurance agent, and I was only selling life insurance for surrogates, and I only could offer the term policy because that's what we offered. I would actually, that was a big selling point for me, was you should work with me because my plan will last for 20 years. Or so I would say, in using that as counsel, you've got typically the option to get either a 10, 20, or 30-year policy on a term policy. And term insurance, just to keep it super basic, is that you're buying it for a set amount of time, but you don't have to keep it for that long. So when I say a 20-year term policy, it means that the rate will stay the same for 20 years, but you're not obligated to keep it for 20 years. So what I would say if I was talking to a surrogate is that if I done thousands of these cases now, it is that if you want it for yourself, you probably want to ask for a 20-year policy or even 30-year. If you own a home, or if you really want this for the rest of your life, or for your working time or so forth, a 30-year policy is basically going to mean that if you're 26, it'll take you all the way to 56 at the same price. And by that point, your kids are probably grown, and you're maybe okay with, at that point. 20 years, if you have, say, a 2-year-old, will at least get you to the point where your 2-year-old's now 22 and has pretty much finished college, is self-sufficient if sadly you were to pass away the next year. So I would just recommend asking for a 20 or a 30-year policy. They're not, the 20-year is very, very similarly priced to the 10-year. It's a little bit more, but not a lot. The 30-year starts to get a little bit more expensive, but it's still pretty reasonable. And then, even if you get a policy, even if that didn't wind up being the case, you could always come to us and say, hey, I want this policy, even though I got a surrogate accidental death policy, hey, can I get a term policy? I want to keep this for a long time. So yeah, but actually the main point to share is just, absolutely, she can continue it. It's one of the biggest benefits of term life insurance versus the accidental death policy.
And say I wanted to say, well, my husband's not covered either. Could we still come to you even if it wasn't surrogate related?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We do a lot of that. Yeah.
Oh,
And as you pointed out, even for domestic intended parents too. We do a lot of cases for the spouse of the surrogate too. Yeah.
Now, I know you guys do insurance reviews for surrogates, but something I get from parents all the time is, will they look to see, is there an insurance review for my IVF benefits? Do you guys do anything like that? Or do you know anyone that does that? Because I get that a lot from parents. I'm like, well, I can look at your booklet, but I'm not an insurance agent. So
Meaning, do you mean like to look at whether or not the surrogate's insurance covers IVF?
no, their own insurance. So what I find a lot of parents ask, and maybe this is something just to put in the wheelhouse, but they will ask like, hey, how do I know if my insurance benefits cover, infertility, and in the very, very minuscule chance I've seen once where they'd actually covered the surrogate's insurance, but I know that's extremely rare. But do parents do that, or is that more so for their HR department to handle?
So I would say there's a couple thoughts here. Number one, I can think of a handful of cases, but it's just a handful, like 5 or something like that, where someone has asked us to do that. And I do think that it's actually a good idea, and I made myself a little note here to maybe consider it more as something we just offer. But it's becoming more and more prevalent. There's a couple of companies out there that actually focus on this, Carrot and Progeny, that their whole goal is to get their whole goal is to get like surrogacy and benefits like that included for businesses. So they approach big corporations and try to add this or that benefit and so forth. So you're starting to see it more and more.
Nice.
And the yeah, so and then there's a plan which I'm only aware of one company that offers this, but there is this one company, it's a consulting group that has a Cigna plan that I've never seen anybody else have that has benefits like that as well. But unfortunately, it's got a little bit of a hole in it, in that it ends 30 days after the delivery. So hopefully they'll fix that at some point. But we have a solution to that too. But yeah, bottom line, I think it's actually a really good question, and I think it's something we could do, and maybe something that we should actually build a service around.
Awesome. I appreciate you guys. You guys are always coming out with new services and products. And like, I think it's super important for parents and surrogates to jump on your webinars, because you guys offer regular, webinars, and you have all your videos. So
yeah, and we're going to start doing, we've done them sparingly. We do webinars that are sort of intended to the whole industry, but I think starting next month, we're going to actually start doing an intended parent webinar that agencies can send people to, or independents can just jump on, or so forth. So I'm going to do one a month that we just, and then it'll be the same topics more or less until they get updated, but they'll also just be available as a recording too.
Yeah, and I think that's important. If someone misses this or they want more information, they can always reach out to you guys at your website, or on your info email to request more information. So I definitely appreciate your time. I know you're a very busy man, so thank you so much for making time for me, and for anyone out here on Facebook world or who's going to watch this later on. I did have a question, last one, because I see this as a hot topic. We have a lot of intended parents that are with TRICARE, but we also have a lot of surrogates that are with TRICARE. And from what I've heard, TRICARE is a big no-no. But I also see mixed conversations on that. Is TRICARE something to stay away from as a surrogate from their health insurance? Have you, because you guys are the experts, have you ever seen where if intended parents and surrogates both are with TRICARE, that they're able to get permissions, or how does TRICARE even work? It's so confusing.
Yeah, so I don't think I've ever had that last question that you just asked me, where you've got intended parents and surrogate both on TRICARE. So I couldn't really speak to that. We have a team that does our health reviews, but we also have another team that does our ACA search and placement. And between the two, we can get these questions answered. But I would tell you that generally speaking, TRICARE has some pretty loose, lean language. So it's not really preferable. I do know of a couple, I think either agencies or attorneys that have tried to use it, but maybe are just really, really, really talented legal entities that I've heard rumblings that this agency and that this attorney might have used it, but I think in general our stance is that it's not a good practice. There's some language in there that makes it pretty clear that the surrogate's compensation can be requested as a lien. So it's not meant to be a plan. And the idea for anyone that's not familiar with TRICARE is it's a plan for veterans or for people in the military, and it's a very rich plan, or it's a great benefit for them, but it's not intended to cover surrogacy, at least at the moment. Again, I think surrogacy is becoming more and more prevalent, and so maybe all these things will change over time.
We can hope, and we can always, participate and resolve in things and hopefully get these changed. But I really do appreciate your time. I want to thank everybody for coming on. And like always with our webinars, even if you're not a client of ours, whether an intended parent or a surrogate, you can always reach out to me at Ashley, ASHLEY, at surrogatefirst.com, all spelled out. Or you can reach us on our Facebook pages, any of our social medias. We are available to answer questions. We do not charge anything for consults. Whether you are looking to go independent and just need some information, or if you are looking at different agencies, We still hold firm to our no match, no fee policy, which would mean that until 4 things have occurred, you've approved profiles, clinics have approved records, you guys have done your successful match meeting, and at that point have decided to move forward. So just know that at any point we're able to help you with no strings attached. And then thank you so much, Jason, for being here with us. I appreciate you. I love your company and what you guys stand for. And I'm so thankful that you guys have that knowledge that you guys share freely too with, clients and protecting them. Surrogacy is not a cheap endeavor, and it could substantially be even more if there's some kind of complication. And so for you guys to help out with that, the worst case scenario would be for family to bring home their child and then live with a lifetime of debt because of a simple not picking up of policies that could have protected them. And so I definitely appreciate you for all of that. And again, thank you so much for joining our webinar.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Have a great day.
Okay. Bye-bye.